Second oral question, Lord Thomas of Gresford.
Lords, I beg to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lord, state pensions are not in scope of the negotiations on a free trade agreement with Canada. The UK state pension is payable worldwide to those who meet the qualifying conditions without regard to nationality, and the amount is based on an individual's national insurance record. UK state pensions are uprated overseas only where there is a legal requirement to do so, and the government has no plans to change this policy.
Governments say that over the past 30 years, they've made repeated efforts to persuade the UK government to do what they do for their own citizens, namely to index the pension, to index the UK pensions of UK retirees who are resident in Canada. On what principle does the government distinguish between our pensioners in Canada, Australia, New Zealand and certain Caribbean Commonwealth countries, and those whose UK pensions are not frozen, in the USA, for example, and as reinforced in the recent Brexit trade agreement in the 27 countries in the EU?
Well, the rate of contribution paid has never earned entitlement to indexation of pensions payable abroad, and this reflects the fact that the UK scheme is primarily designed for those living in the UK. And I think I would say this to the Noble Lord, that in drawing up expenditure plans for pensioner benefits, the government does believe that its responsibility is primarily towards pensioners living in this country. But the UK's current social security arrangements with Canada provide for individuals coming to the UK to use periods of residence in Canada for the purposes of entitlement to the UK state pension, as well as other certain benefits.
My Lords, can my noble friend the Minister tell the House that we do fulfil our legal obligations to our overseas pensioners?
Yes, I can certainly give some reassurance on that to my noble friend. And she may know that the policy has been challenged in the courts, and the government's long-standing position has been upheld by the High Court, the Court of Appeal and the Appellate Committee of the House of Lords in 2005. Also, the European Court of Human Rights in 2008, following a further challenge.
My Lord. This goes way beyond Canada. Does the Noble Lord agree that people who have worked and paid national insurance all their lives have earned their state pension? And could you therefore answer the question before they didn't really answer, as to why it is that if you choose in retirement to go and live somewhere else, you should not receive what you have earned in full and on the same basis as anybody else?
Well, this issue goes back to what has happened in the past. So the distribution of reciprocal agreements with countries is based upon historic ties with those countries, and the levels of labour and the people mobility flows at the time that the agreements were concluded. So we very much have to look back at that. But I reiterate again that we have no plans to include this in current or future free trade agreements. And can I also say, which he will know, that for instance, if we look at the overseas territories, due to past historic arrangements, you have Bermuda, you've got Gibraltar, and you've got the sovereign base areas of Cyprus included, but the rest not.
My Lord. Okay. Yeah. My Lords, I know quite a few members of the Asian communities who had worked all their life in UK and have paid their national insurance and taxes here, and after retirement they moved to Canada because Canadian immigration system is far more flexible when it comes to joining blood relations and families together. And as a former leader of the council, I know how high the cost can be for a taxpayer for adult social care, and sometimes as much as 50% of the revenue budget of the council. My point being, my Lords, when some of these UK pensioners move to Canada, UK taxpayers saves millions of pounds in not having to look after them in their old age, and that burden falls on the Canadian taxpayers. So why not, after all, they have paid the taxes, they have paid their national insurance, their pension cannot be inflation-proof.
Well, I'm certainly very aware, and this perhaps adds to the answer to the Noble Lord, Lord Thomas, that the Department for Work and Pensions has received requests for a reciprocal social security agreement from Canada in recent years, 2020, 2021, and indeed this very year. But can I say to the noble lord that actually the choice of moving to another country, and let's say Canada, is very much a personal choice, and it's not for the government to encourage or discourage pensioners in moving overseas, but it is, I'm sure, for reasons other than necessarily to do with pensions. It could be to do with family, returning to the country of birth. But I say again that the government has no plans to change the policy.
My lords, I hear what the noble Viscount says, but the APPG on frozen pensions said in their report in 2021 that 80% of people retiring to Commonwealth countries, Canada, New Zealand and Australia, together various Caribbean countries, were unaware that their UK pensions would be frozen. Can the noble Viscount tell us what steps has the government taken since then to publicise their likely predicament? I would inform this House that the government website contains no more than a passing reference to this, and like all passing references, it's in brackets. Could we at least remove the brackets and put it in bold type?
Well, my lords, whether there are brackets or not, I will need to obviously just go back and check for myself what the website says. But as I say, people do move abroad for many reasons. Before they do so, I am certain that they will look at all the pros and cons. It's also their responsibility to take advice and make an informed decision before they move. But can I say, and I hope it gives some reassurance, that there is information, I hope it's not limited, on gov.uk as to what the effect of going abroad will be on the entitlement to UK state pensions, which, as I say, is just one factor that they will be bearing in mind in terms of making that difficult or otherwise decision to move from the UK.
Come back to Canada for a moment. It's been quite an issue in the Canadian media. I'm sure the Minister has read the cuttings. But is he aware that there was last year the Canadian media reported on a woman who got a letter from DWP telling her pension was being stopped and there was no right of appeal? And the reason was she'd failed to reply to a letter demanding she return a certificate proving she was still alive. It then turned out this had happened to thousands of people, none of whom had got the letters. Now, the Canadian media report DWP blamed the Canadian postal system. But, my lords, this must be a challenge. If you never get a letter, you don't know you're meant to reply to it, you can't send the certificate back, then you get a letter telling you your pension's over and you can't appeal. And DWP will only communicate with you by post. So can the Minister tell the House, has this been resolved, and how can future pensioners be sure they don't get caught the same way?
Well, I can't deny the fact that the noble Baroness makes a very good point. I will certainly go back to look at the very specific case that she's raised. I think she's saying that it extends to others, and I will certainly look at that. But as far as I'm concerned, the government should be, and I will check on this, making every communication available for individuals who are seeking to move abroad, particularly to Canada, to have the correct and as much information as possible that they need in order to make all the decisions to make that move.
My lords, is my noble friend aware that a number of members of your lordship's house have received letters signed by some 25 Canadian senators? Did he receive such a letter, and would he be kind enough, if he did, to put a copy of his reply in the library? And if he didn't, I let him have my letter, and perhaps he can do with that.
I can reassure my noble friend that I've received my own letter, and actually it happened to be today because we've been away. I'm already on it, and I will certainly be replying to it. I should be passing it to my officials and making sure there is a response, and I will certainly be sure that my noble friend is copied in.
My lords, could the noble Viscount help me understand why pension arrangements have anything to do with free trade agreements?
Well, can I just reassure him, if I hadn't said it before, that actually the two are separate, so that social security arrangements linking to pensions are separate from free trade agreements. And I think I alluded to that in one of my answers, but let me make that completely clear.
Could I let the noble Lord the Minister know that last week on Thursday I was at the Strasbourg at the Council of Europe as part of the UK delegation, And a group of Canadian parliamentarians very kindly invited a group of the UK members to lunch. And you may guess what the subject of the lunch was. I was sitting opposite a senator who launched into a diatribe about the pensioner situation in Canada. And on my left was a female MP from an agricultural constituency who was bemoaning the fact that Canada imports a certain amount of British beef, but it is unable to export any British beef to us at all. So, my Lords, whatever the noble Lord the Minister and his department may think, there is indeed a very strong connection in the minds of the Canadian government between the two.
Yes, and I understand how they might wish to make that connection, but can I just reiterate again that we see no connection, and in fact the agreements that have been put in place in the past have been social security agreements. But can I also say gently to the noble lord that the agreement between the EU and Canada is not dissimilar to the agreement at the moment between the UK and Canada.
Third oral question, Lord Young of Cookham.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.